we're joined by Mr. Justin Russell, International Foreign Policy Advisor from Washington. Welcome, Mr. Russell. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. And the implications of this potential assassination of Yahya Sinwar and what does it have for the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, particularly in relation to Israel and Palestine?
Well, I mean, you know, we have to be realistic about this. In the eyes of the U.S. administration, you know, they're very happy that this is a big win for Israel. Taking out the head of Hamas, you know, whether it was coincidental or part of an intelligence operation, doesn't matter. I've heard people starting to refer to this as Israel's version of the death of Osama bin Laden. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but the reality is this is a huge win. It does disrupt the command cadre inside Hamas, and it's effective. The one side note on this is that, you know, this might be a way forward to kind of give direction to getting some peace talks going, or at least to get some humanitarian assistance into play in Gaza. The reason why
Russell,
I say that is...
Yes, if I may ask you here, you're
yeah.
speaking about humanitarian assistance or aid. While Israel today assassinated Sinwar, who is the leader of Hamas, it also committed another strike on Jabalia Netzarim, which is filled with civilians, unarmed civilians. So how do you think this would give any chance for peace negotiations? And what is the U.S. role, or how would the U.S. really put any kind of strategies to put any kind of peace to such area and have a real ceasefire?
So, I mean, that's a great question, and this is kind of the path forward, I think, in my opinion. With the death of with Yahya Sinwar, it disrupts the command authority inside Hamas, which means that now you may have fragmented cells that doesn't have, you know, a leadership command and control structure that's required when you're going up against a military force like the IDF. What this does is anybody that ascends into the position, and this is why the advantage goes to the IDF in this instance, and Mossad, is anybody who ascends into the leadership of Hamas, that entire leadership structure is going to be walking around with their head on a swivel, thinking, is this the day that they get this? There's no question that the IDF and Mossad is very good at the intelligence gathering and the ability to hit very strategic and tactical targets without collateral damage.
Mr.
We
Russell,
saw that with the pager attack.
Mr. Russell, we're speaking about the death of more than 42,000 Palestinians. Most of them are children, women, and elders. We're speaking about the targeting of hospitals, schools. We're speaking what kind of operations or very precise operations is Israel carrying out with, and how good the intelligence is in identifying areas with fighters or Hamas members, or areas with unarmed civilians, Mr. Russell?
And this is where this is a double-edged sword for Benjamin Netanyahu. With the death of Sinwar and the pager attacks, et cetera, it proves that it can do very strategic and very surgical operations, which the other side of that sword is doesn't help his cause with the past and the current operations that he's doing inside Gaza and inside Lebanon and possible strikes in Iran. This hurts his ability to continue to say that, look, we are being effective in our military operations. This also puts more pressure on him from the U.S. standpoint, look, Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, and even the president, I'm sure, are looking at this going, okay, you have the win. You took out the head of Hamas. Sinwar's dead. Now you have to seriously look at the fact that now that you've taken out the top yet again, how do you fix and come up with a peaceful solution now? This is going to put global pressure on Netanyahu and the Israeli government to come up with a solution that not only kind of draws back the military operations inside both Gaza and put pressure on the operation in Lebanon, but this is also going to have pressure to mitigate the ongoing humanitarian crisis inside Gaza and now going on inside Lebanon. That is where the biggest source of U.S. and Western ally pressure is coming from on Tel Aviv.
Yes.
Is the fact that every time they do a massive operation, the operation has civilian collateral damage, which does not look good in the eyes of Western leaders.
Which does not look good. Mr. Russell, if I may ask you here about the U.S. role in pressuring Israel not to target civilians, and how do you see that role, and which kind of pressures were put on Israel on this course, particularly after the U.S. sent its anti-missile system THAAD, this defense system, along with 100 American troops to operate. What kind of strategies and what kind of pressures is the U.S. really putting on Israel to avoid targeting or the targeting of civilians?
Well, I want to clarify one aspect of your question. Is we have to remember that the THAAD system is a strictly defensive tool. It is a very strategically defensive weapon system that is very effective. That is a supplement to Iron Dome. The reason why we sent the THAAD battery over to Israel is because that coincides with the U.S. policy of always being able to defend Israel and the citizens of Israel against an offensive attack, like we saw back on October 1st when Iran sent over the missiles. Where the pressure comes now, to the second part of your question, is we saw that announcement from from all three, from the State Department, the Defense Department, and the White House, where they said that you have 30 days to mitigate and fix the ongoing humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza, mitigate and kind of minimize the humanitarian impact in Lebanon. The incentive is, if they do not, we are going to have to abide by U.S. law and re-examine the types and how many or how much defense spending and the type of systems and the use of those systems in your operations in Gaza and Lebanon.
But Mr.
What
Russell,
the White House is saying, and what
in this month you gave to Israel, the number of casualties has risen to the double. And now we're moving on and on with more casualties from unarmed civilians. So we're speaking here about unarmed civilians who are getting attacked by the Israeli forces, who say they are defending themselves from the Palestinian resistance, the Hamas, or any of the fighters. If I may ask you here, where is the balance? Where is the balance? Where is the proper use of force, or the appropriate use of force between both sides? In 1 month, we're speaking about double the number of civilian casualties. Most of them are children and women.
I completely understand. And let me be clear. My answers are not condoning the civilian casualties or the use of force that results in civilian casualties. You know, as a former member of military forces and a civilian policy analyst now, I got to tell you something. Anytime we see any sort of military operation that results in the loss of civilian life, that is never condoned, and that is nothing that I would stand for in any of my analysis. So I completely understand where you're going with this question. What I am saying, though, is that what is happening now here in Washington, going back to the original point of the question of how does Washington put pressure on, is the fact that now that we've seen Israel be able to conduct a very surgical strike on these individuals, whether by luck or by intelligence gathering or by operational ability, the pressure now is coming from Washington to say, look, we can no longer, even by our own laws, we are talking about, the White House now looking at auditing all the foreign military sales and how that complies with the Arms Export Control Act and how that applies to the Administrative Procedures Act. There was a lawsuit that was brought back many years ago here in Washington where an organization tried to block the sale of F-35s to the United Arab Emirates because of their involvement in the Libyan civil war. The basis of that lawsuit is exactly what the White House is trying to use in saying, look, you cannot keep using weapons that the U.S. sells to Israel and there being mass casualties of civilians and women, children, and targeting of civilian infrastructure, because that is against U.S. law. That violates the Arms Export Control Act. The law is very clear, and I think that is the angle, and that is...
Hello? Right. I guess that was Mr. Justin Russell, a global foreign policy advisor. Thank you so much for joining us on Q News.